What a great introduction. I was thinking of when Father had introduced me and he said, I graduated from Georgetown economics. I had forgotten about that. Actually, economics did not influence my life as much as theology did. We were told, I think in grammar school and high school, even in college back in those days, many years ago, that the people who had the best chance of going to heaven were religious priests and nuns. Did you ever hear that? Oh, you did? Oh, good, you're around my age then. And the people who had the second best chance were couples, and then single people had a real tough time, like kids like us, you know. But I heard that consistently from sisters in grammar school, brothers in high school, and priests in college. So I said, there's only one choice. I wanted to go to heaven. So I thought I'd become a priest. Isn't that a good reason? So I don't know about you people, but I'm flying there real soon, you know. So actually, I finished Georgetown, and I went to the Jesuits since they had taught there, and I said, I'd like to become a Jesuit. And they said, oh, good, you have to go through an interview, and it was a 4-hour interview and a 7-hour written test, you know. Well, one of the questions on the interview was, why do you want me to become a Jesuit? And I said, to save my soul. Isn't that great? So he said, he looked at me a little stern, and then right in his, next to his desk, he had a library there, and he took a book out, and it was a little red book. He opened up the second page. It was the Constitutions of the Jesuits, and the second number said, a person joins the Society of Jesus to save his soul and the souls of other people. He said, welcome, man. And he shook my hand. He said, you're in. And I said, oh my goodness, here I'm scared to death. They wanted people who were petrified, you know. So after my I was in about a week or two, and they kept telling all the Jesuit saints who had gone to heaven, you know, very early in their life. Like there was one guy who died in novitiate even. I think it was Stanislaus Kostka. I said, oh, after just 1 year, he went right to heaven. Isn't that marvelous? And then somebody who was in the second year, third year, let's see, Aloysius Gonzaga, some great name, he went to heaven too. And they mentioned all these, and John Berkman, they had all these different guys who had died at age 17, 18, 19, you know, and they said, there's a chance if you stay in here, you'll go to heaven. So they had me hooked, you know. I was so scared. I was scared of life. So anyway, I was in about 10 years, and finally we took theology towards the end, and they said, well, I hope everyone here believes they're going to heaven, that Christ has already redeemed the whole world. And I said, oh, I've wasted 10 years. Oh my goodness, I mean, and sure enough, it was right in the scripture that God loves everybody. And here I thought I could earn my way to heaven. Did you ever get the sense you could earn it if you did enough prayers, you get to heaven? If you said enough prayers, if I just said more prayers, I'd get there. Guess what? The ransom has been paid. It's already been paid. That's the whole message of the New Testament, that Jesus already did it for us. But we don't want people to believe the good news because, hey, well, they think they'll go to church then? We got to get those people in church there, you know? So they have all these reasons to try to scare the heck out of them, and they scared the heck out of me until I was 30. And finally I had this wonderful wake-up experience. Gee, I started believing the good news, you know? So I started talking about it to people, and they were surprised too. They had heard the same stuff I had. And so on most retreats I give, one of the main talks I talk about is God's unconditional love for us. That God has no conditions on his care for us. He loved us tonight the same as when you were born, the moment you were born. God's love doesn't change. You know, sometimes we have friends, depending on where you live in the country and how close you are to your relatives. You have different friends, and they change and they wave. But God's love doesn't change. And everybody said, gee, that's amazing, because we sometimes project onto God the way we are, you know, and sometimes if somebody's not nice to us, we don't like them. Isn't that true? And sometimes if we're not nice to ourselves, we don't even like ourselves. But guess what? God can handle all that. He likes us on our very worst days. That's hard to imagine, isn't it? Because I don't like myself my very worst day, you know. I said, you've got a very strong stomach, Lord. He said, yes. But anyway, I was giving a retreat about 2 years ago, and I was talking about God's unconditional love, and I said, and it was a real surprise to most people, you know, and this one guy said, well, it's not a surprise to me, Father. I said, what do you mean? I said, didn't you go to Catholic school? He said, oh yeah, I did. I said, oh. Did you go to Catholic grammar school and high school? I said, yeah. And you always thought God was unconditionally loving? He said, I always did. I said, where'd you get it from? Because most people lost it, you know? They think like, God loves us, God doesn't love us, God loves us. We have like a yo-yo spirituality, I call it, you know? You think you're in God's graces, then I'm out of God's graces, you know? And he said, well, I think it was my father. I had a very strange father. He said, my mother thought he was one of the boys, because there were 7 in our family, and she thought she had 8 children. And the mother was right there on retreat, and she said, that's true, he was. So he said he would do things like, since he worked nights, he used to work in a hospital, he used to do maintenance in the evenings, but he'd come home in the morning and he'd say, gee, I haven't seen the kids all day long. And he would grab one of us and say, listen, if you come out to breakfast with me, I'll write a note for the schools when you're late. So they go out to breakfast, have a 3-hour breakfast, and he'd talk to his children, He'd do one at a time. So he said maybe once every 3 weeks I'd be able to get out of school, and he'd write a little note, dear sister, please excuse Matthew, he was with me. No other reason. Wasn't sick, no excuse, just, that was it, So he said, I get to school and I give the note, and he said, we always got away with it. And he said, it was sort of interesting, but my father, he was like a ringleader getting us out of school. Can you imagine that? It wasn't like that in my day. So he says, and this one day in school, he said, I was acting up. He said, I was quite a good athlete in junior high school, and my older brothers were on the varsity, and he said, and the Catholic school used to like to beat all the schools in the neighborhood, so it was pretty important that we always played in the games. And he said, but one day I was acting up, and the sister came right down the road, she grabbed me by the ear, and she said, Matthew, that's it. I'm calling your father. I know he works nights. He's home now. I'm calling him up. I'm not going to have any more of your fooling around in my class. So he goes right down to the office by the ear, and said, excuse me, sister, can I please use the telephone? She said, yes, go right ahead. So she calls up, Mr. Sabrinsky? Oh, yeah, yes, sister. Said, can I help you? Yes. Your son has a message for you. Hello, Dad. Hello, son. She said, what's the message? He said, well, Dad, I was acting up in school today. Oh, what were you doing? What'd I do? You were insolent. Dad, I was insolent to Sister Joan and Sister Marie. He said, oh, anything else, son? He said, anything else, sister? Yes, you threw erasers at some of the boys. Dad, I hit Matthew and Bobby in the back of the head with erasers today in class. Okay, son, anything else? Anything else, sister? Yes, you're talking in class the whole time I'm teaching. Dad, I'm talking in class the whole time Sister Marie is teaching. Anything else, son? Anything else? No, that's it. No, that's it, Dad. Okay, son, I want you home at 3:30 sharp this afternoon. We've got a golf match. And don't be late. The tee-off time is 3:30, and make sure your brothers are not delayed at all. Do you got it? Okay, Dad. And Sister said, what did your father say? My father is furious. He wants me home at 3:30 sharp. And she said, well, I was going to keep you after school, but I'm glad. You're going home sharp at 3:30 this afternoon. He said, I had a father like that. And so when they told me that God was going to punish me and God's going to judge me, he said, I never believed them. He said, because if you have someone who's really close to you, who loves you without condition, you can't believe the bad news. But it seems like it's out there, I haven't noticed it in St. Jude's here in Columbia, and it seems like they're pretty free people, But I've been giving retreats to priests and sisters around the country, and I was given a priest retreat a little while back. And I was given some good news, the usual stuff. It was a 5-day retreat. Can you imagine listening to me for 5 days? And so, but they stayed awake. I was proud of them, And so they said after about 3 days, they're looking at me so like this, they had these expressions. Yeah, so I said, what's going on here? And I got them to get in small groups, and they talked about the retreat. They said, well, Father, we have a few complaints here. You're only giving us the good news. This is a true story. On a retreat with priests, I said, you want something besides the good news? I mean, good news is the gospel, I said, I'll give you the non-gospel. I didn't know what it was. And so I said, well, what do you mean? You want the bad news? I said, yes. I said, well, what is the bad news? They said, well, there's sin and there's judgment and there's punishment. And I said, do you want to hear that in your annual retreat? And they said, well, we always heard it before. I mean, you get in a rut, you want to hear it. Please give us some bad news. We just want to hear some bad news, So they actually asked for some bad news on a retreat. I loved it, So I said, geez, I was ordained in 1970, and I'd heard so much bad news my whole life, and I believed it, that I made a little promise I wasn't going to have any more bad news. There's enough bad news in the world. If someone's going to preach, I got to do my best to give some good news out, So that night, I was a little puzzled because I had 2 more days of retreat. So I went up to some of the priests in the area. I said, listen, I'm not from this part of the country here. I said, do you know how I can where these guys can find some bad news? That's what they're looking for, and I'd really like to help them, And some of the priests said, if they go to each other's parishes, they'll hear it every day. Wasn't that great? I was so proud of them, So I got up the next talk. I said, by the way, I think I can help you. If you visit each other's parishes, you'll hear a lot of it. So that was the end of that. So, of course, it went to the bishop. They said, there's a Father Dolan preaching some good news in our diocese. I said, oh, no, not the good news, So I said, yeah, he was upsetting some of the priests there. So I said, bring him back again. Isn't that great? So I go back every year now. Funny. But it's so hard. We get used to hearing bad stuff. It's interesting, And sometimes you hear the good news, you say, oh, the guy's crazy. When Jesus preached that the kingdom of God belonged to the lepers and the sick and women and children and to the poor, the priests, the people who knew the scripture, were very, very upset at him. They said, this is strange gospel, strange news. So I was in retreat work for many years, and in 1981, I was director of a retreat house in Syracuse, New York, and a priest by the name of Tony de Mello came to give a retreat to Jesuits. And there were 70 Jesuits on retreat, and they were there for 8 days, a long retreat. And I make so many retreats, and I'm always in the retreat work. I said, usually I just introduce the speaker like Father Ed did, and then I sneak out the back door, But since the whole church was filled with 70 people, I said, my goodness, maybe he's got something to say. And so I sat down, and all of a sudden I heard someone say, guess what this guy was giving? He came all the way from India, and he was a few years older than I was, and he was giving all the priests good news, and I had never heard it before. In all the years in the seminary, I'd say, say your prayers, and you might go to heaven, and things like this, and I found my heart dancing. I was sitting in the pew there, just like that, I heard ba-doom, ba-doom, and I felt like I was dancing, and so I said, this guy's really got a nice message, And so I made all the retreats, all the talks for 8 days. It was so exciting. And he was very consistent, and I read the Gospels. And I said, Tony, how did you figure the good news out? Because it seems like there's always good news and bad news. He said, you have to see things for yourself. He said, so often, like when you go to school, you get a lot of information from other people, and then you have to take tests on what they say. And if you give it right back to what they say, you get a good grade. And then you go to another school and further up, and every course you ever take, you're always giving back what people say. And I had a degree in philosophy, and I never had my own thoughts. And a philosopher is someone who thinks for himself. A person, they can really think, but we learned how to memorize and give back, and we had all these answers, but hadn't had any thoughts. And I've met people who've gone 50 years of their life and haven't had their own thoughts because, my thoughts, they're not really good. I'm looking for the experts. There was a friend of mine I heard the story later on. He had sat on a pin, I don't know if it was in church or what, and he said, oh my goodness. He said, he's walking around a little bit like this, and he went to one of his best friends and said, geez, I got this pin here right in the side. He said, well, listen, I've seen those things happen before. He said, just sit on the left cheek, So the guy said, yeah, thanks a lot. It was relief, He said, no, he waited about 2 days. It was really uncomfortable, especially at night, when you roll over. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, son, we can give you two things. We can give you pain medicine, or we can do a pinectomy, And he said, I don't like to take medicine. I think I'll just back off a little bit, So he went to a psychologist, and the psychologist wanted to do a case history. He said, now, either your parents ever have a pin problem? They're going all the way back. How about your grandparents? And he went to a theologian, beautiful guy in a lovely parish nearby, and he said, my son, he said, Jesus suffered. Maybe there's a great value to suffering. So maybe you can offer all the suffering up, So he said, gee, that's all these people like wonderful ideas, And he went to a philosopher, and the philosopher said, what do you think the meaning of this is? So the guy was trying to figure out what the meaning was, Well, anyway, he left all these places. It took about 2 days of interviews. He's riding home on the bus on one side. There was a little kid next to him, and he said, Mister, he said, why are you leaning like that? He said, say I've got a pin. And he says, why don't you get off it? So I got off it, and he was all better. How do you start? Are people actually not seeing reality? They're just like, they're waiting for the experts. Oh, you've got a wonderful degree. I wonder what you have to say, When Jesus was preaching to people, he was doing miraculous things. Someone was blind one day, and now they see. Someone was in a coma one day or dead, and the next day they were walking. And people said, well, who is this guy who did that? Where did he come from? They're asking all the funny questions. And someone said, well, what did he use to get you out of the coma, And he just used some mud and spittle one time. And they started asking all these questions. And if they could only see, Jesus said, come and see. And the Spirit of God will set your heart on fire. You could wake up yourself. But we have been put to sleep by society, by school, by church, by family, just like, one of the great sleeping things, if you want to have a great experience in your life is when little children get a gift, What is the thing that parents or grandparents always say? Is there anything special? What do you say? That's it. They say, what do you say? And I've seen little kids who are like 9 years of age. After all of those years of being told, what do you say, what do you say? And the kid looks up and says, what do you say? Thank you, you know? So, oh, thank you, you know? It's like, we've been telling people this for years and years. I mean, they're programmed. But you know what's wonderful? If you don't tell them what to say, if you can hold back, stop interfering with their lives, you'll have a wonderful experience of true gratitude and appreciation. Because you can teach someone to say thank you, but you can't teach them appreciation. The most important things in your life you can't teach people. You can make them parrot back to you what you want them to say. They can live up to your expectations, but you can't have them have spirit. So it'd be really interesting. And a few times I've met parents who just let the children receive the gift without telling them the right answer. They just leave them alone and watch them. And usually the child, if they enjoy the gift, they'll play with it. And they might play with it for an hour. They're enjoying their life. But what do sometimes society wants? What is the right answer? We want the right answer. We got to please mommy, grandma. We got to please everybody else. We don't get people after a while to enjoy their own lives. And that's the same thing that happened to us. The reason why God gave us life was that He gave us this incredible world and people and intelligence and a body and the ability to communicate. God wants us to enjoy our life. And I don't know if people are doing that. I think might be good to examine whether you're looking for people's approval, whether you're looking for success. Do you ever say to yourself, I'm going to become free when such and such happens, you know? I think I'll become holy if I finally get here. So our freedom, our holiness, our goodness comes in the future sometimes, and we don't believe we've got it now. We don't believe the kingdom of God is here. I remember this fellow he had a pretty good amount of money, and he wanted to win the lottery. So he used to buy tickets every week, you know, and sometimes, you know, I don't know if you ever do those kind of things around here. Do they have the Ohio lottery here? Oh, too bad. But I met people who buy lottery tickets, they forget to look at them after a while. They're in a habit of buying, but they forget to look at the numbers even. Well, anyway, this happened to this one guy. He'd been doing it for like 4 years. And his wife actually knew his favorite numbers and stuff, so sure enough, she sees in the paper, he had gone to work already. She looks in the paper and says, oh my God, I'm positive that's my husband's numbers, you know? She said, but he's got such a weak heart. I can't call him up. So she said, what am I going to do? She's sitting around the house going back and forth, you know, and she finally calls up Father Murphy in the parish. Said, Father Murphy, you've always been good friends. You know that fellow on the parish council? Yeah, my husband. Well, he's been buying lottery tickets for 4 years. Yeah. Well, his number came up. He said, oh, isn't that wonderful? I said, well, not so wonderful. He's got the bad heart, you know. He said, oh, yes. She said, Father, would you mind breaking it to him? He said, oh, I'd love to do it. He said, I'll take him out to lunch, no problem, you know. So sure enough, he goes out to lunch and he says, hey, he said, John, he said, how you doing? How's work? And fine. I said, and he says, no, how's it? Have you ever won the lottery before? He said, oh, no, Father. He says, you know, in fact, I forget to look at the numbers sometimes, you know. And he said, well, what would you do if you won the lottery? He said, Father, I swear to you right now, he says, if I won the lottery, I'd give half to the church, you know. And Father Murphy had a heart attack. Oh, how do we wake up, you know? So, one of the things that de Mello called his spirituality, because he said everyone has a chance to wake up again. And waking up is something you can, in order to do it, you have to do two things. One, you have to sort of keep your eyes open. You have to look for yourself. Like when you look at a bird or look at the snow falling, if you can just look. Not, well, I've seen snow falling for the last 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. Don't just say, I know what the snow is. That's by definition. That's a habit. See if you can see that these are new snowflakes coming down. This is a new day today. If you can do that, maybe you can even see the tree in your backyard. You say, oh my goodness, because it's been there for a long time. You say, know what? It's a little different this year and this day than it was yesterday and yesteryear. If you can start seeing things new, you've got a very good start on finding the good news, because what's special about the message of Jesus, even though it's 2,000 years old, is it's got to be new for you every day. But you've got to start with very simple things like, a tree and snow, if you can actually, this is a very difficult exercise, but if you can actually see a member of your family in a new way, you're starting to see with the eyes of Christ or the Spirit of God that sees all things new. That's probably one of the hardest things to do, see a member of your family in a new way. Because that's not just a tree you look out, a few times a day. This is someone that you spend a lot of time with. So Tony gave us a tremendous challenge. He said, if you really want to be like Christ, you have to see people brand new. Not the way they were before and not the way you knew them before. Because God keeps no records. When we go to heaven, he's going to say, oh, excuse me, what's your name? He said, oh, Dino, good to see you. He said, oh, this is really wonderful, Lord, up here in heaven. I said, yeah, we're waiting to have you up here. He said, well, isn't there a judgment? He said, oh, yeah, would you like to get judged? He said, well, not particularly. He said, well, what about the good things and bad? He said, I haven't kept any records. I'm a lousy record keeper. He said, he just sees us with our present freshness today. The way God sees us. Brand new creation. Very fresh and alive. No records. He said, oh my goodness, strange. I wonder if people would want to be recognized in their everyday freshness, Because, see, we keep records. We've got memory and all this kind of thing. I remember I baptized my little nephew. My brother had waited about 20 years for a child, so he was around 38 and his wife was around 37, and they had their first child. And I was the godfather. It was great, And also, I don't know, can I baptize at the same time? Well, we had a proxy anyway. So we were doing the baptism, and we got permission to do it at home because my mother had been an invalid for about 12 years. And so my brother invited his closest friends over the years, and we were all gathered in the living room. And it's sort of fun, If any of you have ever been a priest, it's very hard to preach to your own family. It's very hard. A few times I've said Mass at home, and I just begin the homily, and my nephew says something like, can we go home now, Mom? Well, they're at home already, It's like, but it's like they get into a routine, oh, this is church, can we go home now? When is it over, So it's like, it's really hard to preach to your own. I can see why Jesus had trouble preaching in his own hometown too, But on this day of the baptism, I said, I've had some experience here. I can't preach. So I said, I've got to get them involved in this homily. So I asked the youngest ones there, I said, okay, who is the holiest one in this room? I thought they'd pick me. Although, let's see, my aunt's a sister of charity. My mother had been sick for a long time, so she'd been long suffering. We had a lovely nurse from El Salvador taking care of my mother for 12 years, so I thought maybe that might pick her too. And I have a cousin, a Jesuit, so there are a lot of religious people and everything else, And I thought maybe one kid would choose his mother, my sister. That was far-fetched, though, but it could have happened, Just to win some brownie points, So anyway, sure enough, I said, well, who do you think's the holiest? And guess who they said? Yeah, Nancy, you're right. They said the baby. I said, wait, the kid's not even baptized yet. And we were taught that big sin on soul. We thought this guy's like, we were always afraid of all these things, And I was so happy. I had a believing community there. I said, oh my goodness, they got the good news somehow. It's amazing. Because why? The sacraments are visible outward signs that this is a child of God. So once they knew this is an outward sign, I'm going to use water and a little white cloth and a candle and things. And I'm going to say some special words and a blessing and a little oil. These are all outward signs to say that this child came from God, belongs to God, and will be that way all the days of his or her life, That's the message of the gospel. And that's the message of the sacraments. They point a direction. They try to help you see what's really there. God's love is there, So that was a big help for me to see that. See, some people out there do have the good news. They've already got it. So it feels good to hear it again, doesn't it? Because we need assurance over and over again. Like, say, you come to church on Sundays or even during the week sometimes, and hopefully you're getting a reminder that with all of our faults, we're loved just the way we are. And no matter how many good things you do or how many prayers you say, God loves you just the same. God's love is unchanging. So you might enjoy doing good works. I love doing good works. And maybe you enjoy saying prayer, going, I enjoy saying prayers. So you're enjoying it, but God wants us to enjoy our life. But we don't have to win brownie points with God. Isn't it safe, So anyway, I joined the Jesuits, and they said, I was saved already. I said, well, what a surprise this is. So I said to myself, well, I'm already saved. I wonder if I should stay or not. That was a tough decision. And I said to myself, well, do I like what I'm doing? I said, yeah, this is really fun. Well, you know, we had about 200 guys that we had sports every day. In fact, when they had a vocation day and they asked some representative from the Jesuits to go to this school, and they had, oh my goodness, they had, I think there were 7th and 8th graders. They had about 400 kids from different schools came for vocation day. They had a lot of sister representatives and priests and brothers vocations. Well, I was there, but I had forgotten about the day until an hour before the meeting. They called me up and said, Father, there's no booth here for the Jesuits. So I ran, I said, what am I going to bring? So guess what I brought? A bottle of wine, a loaf of bread, a football, golf club, and I brought some, the Bible. So I had a little table there. I just said the Bible, loaf of bread, bottle of wine, football, and a golf club. All these kids came into the vocation day. They all came to my table. They wouldn't go to the other tables. They were throwing a football around and play the golf club and stuff. And they said, why'd you get that? I said, well, you know, we have bread and wine, we have Mass, and we read the scriptures. And I said, and we have some time for sports in the afternoon. I said, that's my vocation. So one of the sisters at the next booth said, can I borrow your football? She wanted some of the girls, you know, the different vocation thing. How are we doing? Good. I thought maybe it'd be good if we said a prayer, you know? Now, this is going to be a little different type. It's going to be, I call it meditation. Because I said there are two things that will help you wake up to the presence of God right in your life, right outside your window, right in your family. One is to be able to see with your own eyes, and the second one is to be able to think clearly. God gave us a mind, and sometimes we think other people's thoughts. So I like to do a meditation on, and the best way to meditate sometimes is to close off all the distractions. So if you'd like to close your eyes for a moment and relax, and you might just become aware of your breathing. There is nothing as close to God as each breath that you take. God gives you life directly by each breath. One day, you and I will breathe God's Spirit. But for now, we have air that gives life to our mind and heart and body. It's amazing how simple it is to be fully alive. And you are. You have a fullness of life in you this very moment. Do you know what it means to be fully alive? Have you ever met someone who is fully alive? One thing is certain. If you wish to be fully alive, you cannot live in the past. Because the past is dead. The past is only a construction of the mind. And so if you were to live in the past, you would not have life in this present moment. And so if you wish to be fully alive, you must drop all your attachments to the past. Your successes or your failures, your faults, your mistakes, your regrets, all those things from the past, they're dead and buried, and Christ has redeemed them. What a great relief it is to know that the whole past, your whole past life has been redeemed. So you can say goodbye to persons and places and events, all the things that happened in the past. Thank you and goodbye. They have helped us to come to this day, and so we are grateful. But they are over, and they may no longer influence your life. For God is giving you grace to live this day. If you want to be one of God's fully alive people, you also must let go of the future. All those things you worry about and plan for, they don't even exist. They are constructions of the mind that get in the way of living in the present. So think of all the things that you're greedy for and let them go. Think of all the things that you ambition. No thanks. What a blessed relief it is to let go of the future. You have all your energy and grace to live in the present. And you can breathe once again. And you can see life without cloudy vision, without worrisome thoughts. What a blessed relief. For God lives in the present moment. When the future comes, God will be there too. But God is found today in the present. No need to think about the past. No need to dwell on what the Lord has done before. Behold, our God is doing new things. Even now they come to light. He is making a road in the wilderness and rivers on dry land. No need to fear what is to come. No need to wonder if the Lord will be with us. Behold, our God is doing new things. Even now they come to light. He is making a road in the wilderness and rivers on dry land. Sing praise, you children of the Lord. Sing praise, O witness as he forms us for himself. Behold, our God is doing new things. Even now they come to light. Even beasts of the field will sing his glory for the wonders he works for us. Alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia. Good evening, everybody. I hope you all had a very prayerful experience since yesterday. Now you're getting deep into prayer. Have you noticed that you found God in all kinds of places during the day today? You did too? Sure. Wow. Did anyone else find God in different places today they didn't find him before? You did? Where? In the snowflakes. You found God in snowflakes? That's very good vision.
Well, no. Those
Oh my goodness, where'd you find God?
With the horses.
With the horses? With the racetrack, was it?
No.
Farm, you have a farm. Oh, good. That's where you have to find God some places, you know. Anyone else find God a different place, a special place? About a year ago, I was asked to give a very unusual retreat. It was to a monastery of cloistered sisters. I was sort of privileged to be asked to do that, but I said, what am I going to say to these sisters? Their whole life is prayer, you know? So I said, where do I start and what stories do I tell and what kind of directions do I give? You know, they should be teaching me. So I thought maybe what I'd do is I'd get a little feedback first. So I walked in and the very first talk I gave to them, there were about 20 sisters there. I said, first talk is around 10 o'clock in the morning, pretty decent. But they had been up since 5 o'clock in the morning. So I said, now since you've been up this morning, sisters, where did you find God? And I'll give you a few minutes to reflect on it. So they spent about 20 seconds, and I said, would anybody want to share where they found God? I thought it would help me with my talk, you know. So one said, this morning when I got up, I went up to visit Sister Euthanasia up in the infirmary. And she's been very sick for a long time, and I walked in, the room was so well lighted, and it was her smile. She was having such a great day. And I just felt the presence of God there, right in that room there, And someone else said, it was such a lovely morning. It was August, actually. And she said, I walked outside the monastery to the garden, and the flowers, I saw the face of Jesus in every flower. Said it was just lovely walking through the garden. And then another one said, the mail came in early this morning, and I got a lovely letter from my niece, and she's been having problems in her family, and I've been praying for it. And she said, and it was a lovely letter. It was so positive. I felt so close to God, Anyway, they mentioned beautiful things like that, and I said, thank goodness you people are normal. I can talk to you, because they were finding God in flowers and letters and visiting someone, I thought they were going to find him in like some elevated states. They were off the ground or something. And I said, how am I going to teach to those people who are like levitating? So I realized they were just normal people. And not one of them said they found God in their prayers in the morning. They prayed for 2 hours, and they didn't find God in church. They had already gone to Mass, which is a normal place. They were finding God in all kinds of other places. So I thought that was really nice that they were, when their life was like that and they had so much time for like formal prayer and for liturgy, they were also finding God in other places too, right outside their chapel. I was at a workshop for retreat directors just this past year, and in fact it was over at Villa Maria here, right down the street. We had a retreat directors workshop there, and this one priest came out to me and said, Jim, I heard you studied in India with Father de Mello, and you're talking about a special kind of spirituality. Could you sum it up for me? I give 30-day retreats on this, and he wants me to sum it up. You mean in a sentence? One sentence, I said, well, and I sort of smiled at him, but then as we talked, I said, I thought of an idea, an example. We're sitting there having a drink, water. So I said to him, his name was Jim also, I said, Jim, I've got the question for you. I just blessed the glass of water, and I said, which is holier, the glass of water I just blessed, or the Atlantic Ocean? Tough question, eh? The whole Atlantic Ocean, from Greenland down to the Cape of Good Hope, from those islands right off the coast of Africa and Spain, all the way over to Newfoundland and New York, that huge ocean. I said to this fellow priest friend of mine, a Jesuit, I said, which is holier, this glass of water or the ocean? And guess what he said? The glass of water. Wasn't he cute? That's how powerful my blessing is. The whole ocean that God made, the creation of the world. But that's how programmed we got. Someone gives you a little formula and you say, oh yes. And you didn't see the beauty that, you know what? When I was brought up, I thought if it was a blessed candle or blessed carpet, I gotta watch out for blessing, my blessed glasses. If anything was blessed, it was holy. But I was just secular. The church and the crosses and the walls, these are all holy. But the sun and the stars and the earth, that's just secular stuff. We studied the sacred and the secular. You know what? The things that I bless are holy, and the things that God made are secular. Look at that one. If that's not a wake-up experience, are the things that God made not holy? Wow, what's going on, And that's why people don't find God in the world, because they said, those people are just secular. I'm not worthy. Listen, you know what? this whole world will pass away, everything holding the tabernacles and everything's going to pass away, but we're not. We're going to live forever. We're God's children. We're God's kingdom. We're the people of God, and we think each other is not holy. Oh, I'm unworthy. So how can we ever wake up to the experience of what is God creating? How can we find God in our very life, in the problems, in the obstacles we face, in the conflict? How can we find God in all the things of our life all around us, rather than just like some little thing that we bless? There was a wonderful story about this boy. He was around 5 years of age, going on 6. And he was out there with his friends. They're playing in the summertime, August. And then it got to be September, and he was still out playing there. The sun doesn't go down until pretty late. And his mother said, I want you on time for dinner. He said, I've got the dinner ready. He said, Mom, it's very important for me to play with my friends. They need me. I'm the leader of the group. They said, you're the youngest one in the whole crowd. Those kids are 12 and 11, and Mom, I'm one of the best in the crowd. They need me. I don't care if you're the best in the crowd. I want you home on time for dinner. Well, the next night he's late for dinner again. So she said, now listen, I don't know if I told you, but I can have dinner tonight, but you can't have any dessert, He said, that's okay, Mom. It's very important what I'm doing out there. So he gave up dessert, didn't bother him at all. So the next night, come home late for dinner, said, that's it, you're going to bed without dinner tonight. Although around 8:30, she got him some dinner. She broke down, She said, I want you home earlier. So finally, she talked to her friend who works down the laundromat. She says, I can't get my son in out there. He's out there. Once he found the world, he's having a great time out there. And I can't. She said, have you tried scaring him? She said, well, I threatened him with dessert. And she said, well, I work with my daughter. When I try to get her to do something, I just try to scare the heck out of her. So, well, what do you do? She said, well, I told him about ghosts and evil spirits, and that usually works because they can't see them. So they start getting this imagination, then they start getting afraid. She said, oh, I hate to instill fear in my children. She said, if you want them home on time, you better give them some. So sure enough, she went home that night, and she said, Johnny, that way you play ball in the park there? Well, right between there's some woods there. At night, just before sunset, ghosts can come out there and eat you. I want you home. I don't want you to be eaten up at night, so I want you home on time, The the boy said, Mom, you don't believe in ghosts, do you? And she said, yes, I do, and you better believe in them too. So he's laughing. He wasn't going to believe in ghosts, You know what happened, though? The next night, before sunset, he was in the house. Something played on his imagination, and he just he wasn't sure, And so I'm getting home. So he got home. And every night from then on, he was home at sunset. So sometimes the wintertime would get to be at 4 o'clock, the sun would set early. He's home in the house, He was getting afraid of getting eaten by ghosts. So it worked. Well, this went on. He was 6 then. This went on for another 5 years, they said. And he would never go out at night. And this one night, she was having company, and she said, John, would you go to the store and get some milk down the corner there? He said, I'm not going out there. He said, I told you to go to the store. And I go, here's the money, get the... He said, I'm not going. Why not? I'm afraid of the dark. She said, who have you been playing with? I don't like your friends. She said, Mom, you taught me that. And I've been scared ever since. I don't know why, but when it's dark out, I'm afraid. She said, oh, my goodness. Listen, I'll give you extra dessert if you go to the store. Nope. I'll let you have your friends over for a party. I'm not going out there. And she couldn't get him to go out in the dark. The fear was instilled. Once you indoctrinate somebody, it's doctrine from outside, stuck in there, and you can't, the rest of the time you're limping the rest of your life. That's what indoctrination is. And it happens to many people throughout the world, not just in religions, in governments and things like that. I tell you many stories, and you probably know them yourself, where someone gave them a doctrine, stuck it in, and it wasn't theirs. And their life had changed. And you don't know it's almost like they're on remote control. They're living by some other fear. Well, this lady was at her wit's end, and she was still going down the laundromat to do her laundry, and she talked to her old friend there that gave her the clue in the first place. And she said, now I can't get my son to be unafraid. What did you do? She said, well, what I did with my daughter was, she had so many fears, I just gave her different medals to wear. So he said, oh, that's good. So she went home, and she looked in the back of her drawer. She found the back of her drawer. She found some neat medals, and she said, here's an old one. He'll love this, So sure enough, she put a medal on and said, this medal wards off all evil spirits. You are now protected. He said, oh, Mother, thank you. He was so happy. And so sure enough, he had his medal on, and he opened the door, and it was dark out. He stepped outside. And he said, oh, he felt so good, And he walked out, and he was walking in the darkness with his medal. Isn't that lovely? So the only thing was, though, he was still afraid of the dark. But now he had another fear. You know what that was? He He was afraid of losing his medal. Oh, the poor guy. I mean, sometimes we don't even want to pass on fears, and we're passing on fears. I mean, she just wanted him to come in at night. She just wanted him to go to the store. She just wanted him to not be afraid. So sometimes with our best of intentions, we're passing on fear to people. I mean, I still remember when back in my day, we had something like a little scapular that said, if you wear this scapular faithfully, when you die, you're going to go to heaven on the next Friday. That was a really beautiful thing. And everybody wants to go to heaven, so I was afraid to take mine off in the bathtub, though. Getting soggy. I said, God's going to get me in the bathtub. I just felt it. Oh, my, you couldn't take it off. So it got soggy. My mother said, what are you wearing that for? So my mother didn't have those superstitions. I got them from somebody else. The reason why I bring up fear is that prayer means I have a feeling of oneness with God. Prayer is an experience, and you can have it almost any time, day or night, or in church, or at home, or taking a walk down to the Dairy Mart here. You get an experience of, I feel one with God. That's what prayer is. When you're in love, love means I have a feeling of being one with the person I love. You just have a feeling. It's an interior feeling. I feel one with this person, and that's what love is. And someone who's happy feels one with creation. They feel one with the things that God has made. And if you feel upset or worried or anxious, that means you don't have this sense of oneness with God. So we can have all kinds of unsatisfying feelings and unhappiness and anger and anxiety. But as soon as you have that sense of being one with God, you're not afraid of anything. Now, I've met people like that, haven't you? They just feel like, I don't know, they believe they're okay, they believe in themselves. They really feel a oneness with creation and the people they love and God. They get this great sense, But sometimes along the way, people lose it. If you could ever find out where you lost it, where'd you get those fears from? That God was not dwelling within you and dwelling around you. If you could ever find out where that came from, you could say, oh, now I see where it came from. I can tell when a good friend of mine lost his sense of trust. He was very well adjusted in kindergarten, did very well in school, and he liked all the tasks they did, and he got along well with the children, he loved his teacher. And in first grade, he went to school and the same thing. Hey, he did very well, and he loved going to school. He was the first one with his little book bag, his little lunch bag, he got things ready. And then all of a sudden in second grade, I think it was the second month of school, he wouldn't go to school. His mother said, what's the matter? I don't know, I just don't want to go to school anymore. So the mother called the older brother and said, listen, would you take Johnny to school? Because he loved his older brother. So his older brother said, come on, let's go. He said, I don't want to go. But he, anyway, got him to school. And as soon as he got to school, as soon as the teacher's back was turned, he ran all the way back home, across from a mile trip, across some main streets. So the mother was really worried, So then they tried to say, well, we'll take you to Disney World. And they had all these beautiful bribes and things. They couldn't figure it out. Remember, his father stayed home from work one time to try to get him to school. See, he liked his teacher, and he couldn't figure out why he wasn't going to school. So you know what they actually did after, there was 2 weeks went by, and he wasn't going to school. Every day they brought him, he'd run home. They actually brought him to a psychiatrist. He was only in the second grade. And the psychiatrist was very understanding. They ask good questions. They have a lot of trust there. And the doctor said to him, did anything ever scare you? Blah, blah, blah. And he asked him something aside from school, just another area. And he said, oh, yes. He said, I'm worried that someday I'll go home and my mother won't be there. And he said, oh, where'd you get that from? So, well, about a month ago, one of the boys' mothers died in school, and we had a funeral. And the teacher said to us, now you boys and girls better be very good to your parents, because you never know if someday you go home, they won't be there. And he heard it. Most of the other kids heard it. It didn't affect them. And this person felt it. The doctor figured out what it was. So his trust had been broken. Trust in God, trust in life. And even though there was love for the mother, they just knew that he wanted to be there all the time. So the psychiatrist, once he found out what it was, he called the mother and father and said, oh, I found out what it was. Said, about a month ago, his trust was broken. But he said, it happened, we've got the answer so soon, I think we can patch it up. Remember sometimes if someone loses a finger in an accident, they put it back on again, it works, it grows? If you catch it soon enough. And even though this was a very devastating, emotional, spiritual hurt, if we catch it soon enough, we can put it back together again. So I think it will work. So is there any way Mrs. D, that you can get to go to school with your son because you're the one who's got to go, not the father and the brother and stuff. She said, oh, sure, I love to go to school there. In fact, sometimes I go to Mass. Well, tell him that you're going there and you're going to be there at church for a while and you've got some work to do in the car. Just stay there a while, see what happens. Because then he's not going to want to go home again. He wants to be with you. So she said, okay. So sure enough, the next day, also the doctor said to his brother and sister, now listen, your little brother had a very traumatic experience last month, so what he needs is you to be always on his side for a while. Like, you big brother there, when you go in the store, take him along with you, and if you play sports with him, I said, oh, he's a great athlete. I taught him everything he knows. Have him on your side. He just needs a little bit more security right now. Okay, we can do that. So they went up to teach her when they got back home, and they said, oh, here's what happened. She said, oh, I remember the funeral mass we had. Oh, yes. Fortunately, no one else in the class was affected by it. So they said, what we're going to do is Mrs. D will be outside in the parking lot there for a while until he overcomes this, So sure enough, they brought little Johnny to school. And his mother said, now I'm going to be going to Mass at 9 o'clock and I've got some knitting to do. And so the teacher noticed that he looked out the window once during the morning and saw the car there and forgot about it, never looked out again. And so he came home on the bus, and the next day, mother drove him to school and said, oh, I'm going to Mass today and I've got some letter writing I've got to do. So I'll be in the parking lot doing this stuff, And he said, okay, if you want to be. So he went to class that day and the teacher noticed that he hadn't looked out the window once all day. So the next day, she's going to school and said, oh, I'll take you to school. He said, what are you taking me to school for? I'm taking the bus. You've been healed already, Sometimes if you find out who is teaching the fear, if you catch it right away, you can heal the bonds, Now, sometimes I've met a lot of people giving retreats now for 22 years. I meet a lot of people who they thought that maybe something would happen and God would abandon them, or God would reject them, or God would turn his back, And I said, oh, whoever taught that, if they could have only gotten healed right away, that even that beautiful song tonight we read, though the mountains may fall and the hills turn to dust, nothing could ever separate you from God's love. And if you turned away from God, he'd say gently, call you back, don't worry. But how many people gave us that consoling answer, the good news? Sometimes they wanted to get something done, so they taught the fear and it worked. So there are many people, very holy religious people, who their primary fear is they're afraid of God, which is amazing. Of all things Jesus wanted us to have in our life, one thing was certain. You can be afraid of chipmunks in the future and butterflies, but you can't be afraid of my Father. Too gentle. You think I've given my life for you. My Father would give his life for you too. On your very worst days. St. Augustine says that when Jesus was being crucified, he wasn't aware of people killing him. He wasn't aware of people spitting on him. He wasn't aware of the names they called him. He was aware that he was giving his life for them. So what are you aware of in life? If you want to be aware of the things that are negative, we can have very negative feelings. If you want to be aware of the grace you have and the power you have and the goodness you have. I've met people who live with a nagging person for 35 years. Seriously, every day was nagging. Ceaseless on everything. On clothes, on room, on being on time. And you know what? The guy was happy his whole life. He was not going to be at the mercy of someone else's words. You can have a nagging boss, you can have a upsetting person in your family, and guess what? They're not allowed to take away your happiness. They can make their life miserable, but they can't take it away from you. A spiritual person is someone who is not at the mercy of any person. They're not waiting for someone else to give them happiness. They're not at the mercy of anything. They're not waiting for something else in life to give me my happiness. And they're not waiting for any event before they're going to be happy. They realize that God is here. They're one with God. You have one vocation in life, it's your happiness. And we got it by nature. And people try to take it away. And they said, if you just try to do this and become this, you're going to be better. And you know what they made us? Greedy people. They were trying to make us feel good and saying, you could do this and do this, but watch how it makes us greedy and competitive and sneaky. But if you tell them they have the kingdom of God there, guess what? They've got a dancing heart. They notice the poor. They become generous people. Their whole life changes because they know they've got God in them, and they're no longer competitive. I was doing a mass outdoors for a sister friend of mine, her 25th anniversary, and we had a lovely mass in the park, and then they had the reception in the park too. Thank God it didn't rain at all. I remember at the mass, we all gathered around for the Our Father like you do here. I love that when they hold hands. That's nice, you know. It's a real sign of oneness here. I was holding a little small hand here down here. So we said the Our Father, and after the mass, this little girl, she must have thought she was holding God's hand. And so she followed me around the whole time, just because we had hands of the Our Father, you know. So she was walking, and you know, when people are healthy, they talk. There's so many things to talk about, you know. It's like a bird they like to tweet. Can you imagine a bird that was, what will people think? I better not tweet. Thank God, they've got a song, you got to sing it, you know. We've got so many ideas and feelings. It's great to communicate, isn't it? Well, anyway, this kid was doing it. I only heard 1/3 of what she said. You know, I was talking to different people. She's don't talk. And she said, but I heard her say one thing. She said, and I've got 2 older brothers and they're mean to me. Well, I picked that one up, you know, and I said, what was that I just heard? She said, well, I've got 2 older brothers and they're pretty mean to me. I said, well, I had an older sister and she's mean to me. And she said, oh. I said, yeah. So I said, they probably don't realize that you're a princess, do they? She looked at me like, I mean, I'm a priest. I have to tell the truth, you know? It's my job. So I said, she said, what? I said, they're probably mean to you because they don't realize you're a princess. Well, she went over. The mother was at the table over there. She said, I heard her say, Mom, am I a princess? She was only about 6 or something. And she looked up at me and she said, you certainly are. And all of a sudden she took off. She started skipping down the park, you know, just like flying. If she had little wings, she would have flown, you know. But she skipped around the park like, can you imagine at 6 years of age, you lost the belief that you're a princess? How can people teach that to the people, that they're not special, that they're unique in God's creation? So she came back to me and she said, she skipped around the park, came back, she said, boy, I can't wait to tell my brothers. You know? And I said, oh my goodness, I don't know if it's going to work or not. Sometimes the good news is good, but it's not always working. So I said, I'm not sure about your brothers, but my sister didn't believe I was a prince. She didn't? I said, I don't know if your brothers think they're going to believe it. She said, I don't know. I said, why don't you keep it a secret? Don't tell your brothers you're a princess. Let them find out for themselves. And if they're really ignorant, they probably won't even notice it, you know? She said, that's right. I said, well, but you've got enough people. Like, does your dad know you're a princess? And right away, she said, he wasn't there at the party. He said, yeah, he does. I said, and your mom, I just heard your mom say, yeah. And I said, I do. That's enough people. Don't tell everybody. She said, good idea. And she skipped again around the park, came down to earth a little bit. But you know what? Jesus believed he was a prince. And he believed it his whole life, whether he was being rejected by people. You know, he went back to his hometown. He was kicked out of the temple. The first time he preached in his own village, rejected by his own. And he still knew, it's okay. You can reject. It's wonderful you reject me. I know God loves me. It's not going to bother me at all. He just rolled off his back. When I was in India about 1986, in our group with Tony de Mello, there were 6 sisters and 6 priests in our group. And he would always come with these incredible questions and very powerful therapy. Sometimes it wasn't long-term therapy. He would just like ask a question that would get inside. And you'd see people waking up right before your eyes. They'd almost start dancing out the pew. You know, you better not dance right now. But they'd be dancing. Something was going on inside. They would wake up. You know, some people have been asleep for 40 years. I don't know who mesmerized us, you know, and they wake up after 40 years. It can happen to anybody. So don't give up yet. If you're over 50 like myself, don't give up. It can still happen. So anyway, I'm only 45. Anyway, Tony de Mello came into class one time, you know, he says, there was a psychologist in our class who was also a sister, you know, he said, Neela, I have a question for you. And she said, oh, what is it, Tony? He said, I'd like you to tell me, who is the biggest ass in the class? Well, in India, you know, you sort of know what I'm saying, but in India, it sounds like a holy word, you know? I mean, you say ass and class. It was such a classy thing that he said, who's the biggest ass in the class, you know? He had a beautiful way of speaking, you know? So all of a sudden, he said that and people laughed. And she said, oh, you're kidding, Tony. He said, no, I'd like to know who the biggest ass in the class is. So all of a sudden, I really liked the people I was with, and all of a sudden, it was a lovely day in India. We were under a beautiful tree there, and all of a sudden I started sweating. I could feel it go right down my back, a big drop of sweat, because I knew that I was. These other people were so good and holy, and here I am, I was like, I couldn't believe myself. I gave a very poor example of American, over there. I was the only American in the group. And I said, she's going to pick me. And I didn't want to be called an ass in front of all my friends, especially in front of Tony de Mello, who's the teacher. I said, oh, what is he going to think? He's probably going to think I'm not doing well with my Indian friends, So I remember saying a prayer, my first one in about 2 days. I said a few prayers. Dear God, please don't let them call me an ass. I know I am. I just don't want them to say it out loud. I was a little scared, when you're in class, when you're in school, you don't want to get called on, so you put your eyes down. Well, this was a person in my own class. I still didn't want to get called on. So I had my eyes down like this. And she said, Tony, I'm not going to answer that question. I said, oh, I was relieved. The sweat was really good, And he said, well, we're not going to continue class until you do. So I went back to sweating again. I was worried again, So, and all of a sudden, she said, I have the answer. I said, oh, this is it. When you're scared about something, you don't want something to happen? You get nervous about things. I could tell I wasn't a prayerful person. As soon as you're anxious about something, you're not in touch with the Lord. Holy people, Christian people, prayerful people can't be scared of anything, especially what people think. Give me a break. Especially words of other people. Sticks and stones will break our bones, right? But not words, So anyway, but I was still scared. So she said, Tony, the biggest ass in the class is you, Tony. She called the teacher that. And everybody was relieved. I said, I never would have thought of that, and she was so brave to say he was. Especially if you're asking a question like that. All these very holy nuns and priests. So she says, and everybody laughed. They were all relieved. I guess the other guys were scared too. I didn't believe it, because when you're scared, you always think of your own stuff. You don't realize other people are scared too. So sure enough, Tony said, yes, I am the biggest ass in the class. And he was proud of it. He said, yes, that's true. He wasn't afraid at all. Can you imagine that? We were all scared. They're like, please don't call me an ass. Please don't. We're all upset. We almost had a heart attack, And he's saying, oh, good, I'm an ass. He's not afraid of it. If someone says, you are a fool. Oh, great. Okay, what else is new? And someone else, oh, I'm a fool. I'm so bad, Some people get devastated because of words. Isn't that true? What will people think? Isn't that right, Hazel? Thanks. My goodness. So anyway, Tony said there are two types of asses in the world. There are wise asses and there are stupid asses. He said, now stupid asses, they're ones who, everyone's got an ass, of course, But he said, stupid asses don't want anyone to know they have one. They're afraid, oh, please don't tell me. Oh, no, I've never made a mistake in my life. They don't want anyone to ever see them have a flaw in their personality. They are petrified if anyone says you made a mistake. They will defend themselves. Oh, it wasn't me, it was the typewriter. It wasn't me, the letter was wrong. They're always blaming other people. They can't say, oh, yes, I was wrong. They don't want anyone to admit. Stupid asses are ones who don't want to admit they were ever wrong. They're just perfect little people. They don't even have an ass, Yeah. And Tony says, they're stupid asses. They're denying the fact that way God made us. We're limited people and we're going to always make mistakes. You haven't had one single perfect hour in your whole life because you're just a limited person. We're just human beings. That's it. And we're trying all these times to be something we're not. And then Tony said, there's another type of ass too. It's a wise ass. And a wise ass is someone who knows he's an ass and accepts it and nothing can bother him anymore. Isn't that amazing? Not afraid anymore. He's not the mercy of what other people say or think, not the mercy of other events. Their happiness does not depend on what other people think. Can you imagine going through life not at the mercy of what anyone says or thinks? You start flying, you become like that eagle. You just find yourself taking off. You say, The thing is though, Tony told us in India, he says, I remember, by the way, I walked out of class and I was hoping I was going to be a wise ass someday. I was hoping someone would say, Jim, you're an ass. And I'd say, oh, thank you very much. Yes, I know it. In other words, it wasn't going to bother me anymore. I hope I wouldn't be bothered by that little silly stuff, My goodness, we've been programmed, I'll tell you, from early childhood to say the right thing, to do the right thing, to please everybody. Oh my goodness. Most people have heavy overturned shoulders, not because they're wearing the wrong straps. It's because they're burdened down by trying to please everybody, Awful. So Tony said to us, now listen, because we had all these exercises, trying to wake up and be who Christ made us to be and God created us to be, to be alive and free and have your own life. The kids say nowadays, get a life. They mean it. So often we're busy about other people's lives and other things, and we're carrying on. Get your own life. There are too many things to enjoy here. There are people, there's your breathing, there's exercise. How many people do exercise here? Look at that. It's really hard for me. Oh, thanks, Ed. It's hard for me to do it. It's like I dance around so much, that I don't have time for it. But exercise is great. Get your life, get it together. And you won't be worried about other people think and they say, and you won't be like, Tony said to us, when you leave India, don't be surprised. When you go back home living with the turkeys, you're going to become one again. You're flying like an eagle for a few months there, but he said, when you live with turkeys, after a while, you just get browbeaten and you become just like the other turkeys you live with. Isn't it true? And we're so susceptible and influenced by what other people think and say. So prayer is union with God and this feeling that you're one with God. And the only thing that gets in the way is wrong ideas in your head that block this experience, any fears that you have that block that experience, any worries or anxiety. So it's really important, if you find yourself, do people, what percentage of the day you worry at all? If I asked you, are you a really happy person and you're sort of, you're able to take things as they come? Or how many things every time it comes up is it a worry, What percentage of the day do you think you're a worrier person? What percentage are you instead of a happy person? Anybody have any percentages for themselves? We had 2 people this morning. I asked that question this morning at church, and guess what? We had 2 people who didn't worry at all. Isn't that great? And they were older, too. I thought maybe kids. Do you worry much yourself? Not too much? Do you worry much? No, not too much. Do you worry, Nancy? Oh, good. Sometimes, yeah. Anybody have a percentage of worry they do? Yeah. I think I probably used to worry about... let's see, up till about 1980, maybe 70% of the time. There's so many things and problems in life. You have to worry about your family. You got to worry about this. I wonder if I said my prayers right. I was worried about everything, And all of a sudden something happened. And now I have trouble worrying. I've been trying to think of things. There's so many things in the world to worry about, You have to just read more papers and let's really start worrying about this. It's really going to solve the problems, But guess what? Worry is a very selfish thing. Worry is not love. Worry has nothing to do with trust. Worry is me just it's all ingrained, and these people get smaller and smaller. So one of the important things, you want to become a prayerful person, you have to find a way of dropping those things. A life of trust. I thought what we might do is have a little prayer, because that'd be nice to just close your eyes and reflect for a second. And of course, the best prayer, the simplest one is without any thoughts at all. Your mind gets in the way so easily. Just be aware of your breathing. What a lovely presence of God that is in every breath you take. And just to get in the present moment, you might feel your feet on the floor and your body leaning against the pew. You are right where you are. This is right where God created you this evening. You can hear the sounds in this room. What a wonderful gift God has given you in giving you life. What does it mean to be happy? When you are happy for no reason at all. True happiness is unself-consciousness. And holiness is the same. The moment you are aware of your holiness, it goes sour and becomes self-righteousness. A good deed is never so good as when you have no consciousness that it is good. Your left hand has no idea that your right hand is doing something good. You simply do it because it seems the natural, spontaneous thing to do. Spend some time in becoming aware that all the virtue that you can see in yourself is no virtue at all, but something you have cunningly produced. If it were real virtue, you would have enjoyed it thoroughly and would feel so natural that it wouldn't occur to you to think of it as a virtue. And so the first quality of holiness is its unself-consciousness. The second quality is its effortlessness. Think of this. Effort can put food into your mouth, but it cannot produce an appetite. Effort can keep you in bed, but it cannot produce sleep. Effort can make you give a compliment to someone, but it cannot produce genuine admiration. Effort can perform acts of service, but it is powerless to produce love or holiness. All you can achieve by your effort is repression, not genuine growth. There is a third quality of holiness. It cannot be desired. If you desire happiness, you will be anxious lest you do not attain it. You will be constantly in a state of dissatisfaction. When you desire holiness for yourself, you feed the very greed and ambition that make you so selfish and vain and unholy. Here is something you must understand. There are two sources for change within you. One is the cunningness of your plans that push you into making efforts to become something other than you were meant to be. And the other source of change is the wisdom of nature. Thanks to this wisdom, you become aware, you understand, and you leave the change, the type, the manner, the speed, to reality. Your ego is a great technician, but it cannot be creative. It goes in for methods and techniques and produces so-called holy people who are rigid, consistent, mechanical, lifeless, as intolerant of others as they are of themselves. They are really violent people, the very opposite of holiness and love. They are the type of spiritual people who, conscious of their spirituality, then proceed to crucify the Messiah. Nature is not a technician. Nature is creative. Nature is truly holy. And you will be a creator when there is no greed in you, and no ambition, and no anxiety, and no sense of striving and gaining and arriving and attaining. All there is a keen, alert awareness that causes the dissolution of all one's selfishness and foolishness. An awareness that dissolves all one's fears. And the changes that follow in your life will be the product of nature. And there will be no room for a sense of merit or achievement, or even any consciousness on the part of your left hand of what reality is doing by means of your right. Come by the hills to a land where fancy is free, and stand where the peaks meet the sky and the walks meet the sea, where the river runs clear and the bracken is gold in the sun, and the cares of tomorrow must wait till this day is done. Come by the hills to a land where life is a song, and sing while the birds fill the air with their joys all day long, where the trees sway in time and even the wind sings in tune, and the cares of tomorrow must wait till this day is done. And the cares of tomorrow must wait till this day is done. Good evening. Well, there's a last night of retreat. Does everyone feel holy?
Yes.
I don't know what that feels like, actually. That experience of holiness. Although we talked about it this week, that this experience of holiness is a sense of feeling one with God and with creation. You don't feel separate. You feel like you're sort of dancing on the world, and it's sort of like your world. It's your place to dance right now. One of the mystics talked about when you feel like God is the dancer and we're the dance. So God is sort of dancing us. You sort of feel that close. There's no separation, like God is not someplace else. God is right here. It's a great sense of, we call it reconciliation, being reconciled together. You get this sense of oneness. Tonight after the service, we'll have an opportunity for confessions. Just this past few months, I was doing first confessions, and I don't know if you can remember the first time you went to confession, but I guess some people were nervous, and remember, some parents actually would give children some sins to say because they didn't know what to say. Hey, read this list off. Father will be happy with that list. Anyway, when I was being prepared, the CCD director, religious ed director, said, "Now, Father, on the new penance service, we give out awards." I said, "You do for the first one?" They said, "Oh, we have little prizes or banners or bookmarks. You know, one said awesome and all kinds of things, you know." So I said, "Oh, that's a lovely thing to do." So the kids walked in there and they're like looking for their prize, you know, so you got them in there like a dog bone. But anyway, I said, "Well, do you want to start?" And he said, "Okay." And nothing happened. So I said, "Well, how do you start?" I said, "I don't know." And they only had 2 months of preparation. So I said, "Well, I usually say, 'Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.'" No answer. So I said, "Would you like to say that?" "Oh, okay. What should I say?" "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." I said, "Okay, good. Do you have any sins?" "Can't think of any." I love it, you know. They're such holy people, you know. So finally, we got through some stuff. And finally I said, "Now, do you know the act of contrition?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Oh, well, why don't you repeat after me?" "Oh my God, I'm heartily sorry for having offended you." He said, it was like a mouthful, you know. He said, "Oh my God, I'm heartily sorry for having a friend like you." So I realized that was over. I just gave him his award and I'm get out of here, you know. Well, anyway, we opened the door. He was like in the sacristy, and he comes out, and there were a bunch of other kids waiting there for their first penance. And he jumps up and said, "Hey, I won. And he jumped up and down. So like a victory. So, but we had a whole different spirit of going to confession. We thought we were sinners. This good friend of mine is a sister, and she told me she was babysitting for her nieces one time. And while she was in the kitchen, she overheard the older one saying to the younger one, "Do you know what day tomorrow is?" And the younger one said, "Of course I do. It's my birthday." And she said, "And do you know how old you're going to be?" And she said, "Of course, I'm going to be 7. I know my age." And the older sister said, "And do you know what that means?" And she said, "No, I don't." She said, "It means you can go to hell." And things, I didn't understand what she was talking about. So all of a sudden I remembered that back in our day, before your time, that when you reach the age of reason 7, you were able to commit sin and you could go to hell. So that was one of the great joys of being a Catholic, you know. It's like, whoa, now we can do it, you know. So it's like, But I couldn't believe I was still learning this stuff in some parishes, So this kid, this was just last year, they're still doing that some places, I said, oh my Lord. But the older sister's telling the younger one what's going to happen when they first confession, On their 7th birthday, that's a great chance. So, some people they didn't get it right from the priest or the sister or the teachers in CCD, but somehow they keep getting some bad news. It keeps going out to the church. So every once in a while you need a little retreat to sort of put the brakes on, There's some other good news out there. I was surprised, though. I give a lot of retreats to priests, and I asked them to tell me some stories because I'm writing a book about all my favorite retreat stories. So I've got some envelopes here. So later I want you to, if you want to give me a special gift before you leave, write down your favorite story, and you'll be published, and you'll get rewarded in heaven because I'm not going to give you a thing. But I've got 150 stories. I only need about 100 more, so we've got to punch them right here. But this one priest, he told me that he, I think it was up until the 60s, I'm not sure, maybe Melvin or Ed would be able to tell me, but they had what they call clerical exams. That the priest, after he was ordained, 5 years afterward, the bishop from the diocese would go to all the different parishes where there was a new priest, 5 years ordained, and give them a little exam, just to see if he was keeping up in his theology. So sure enough, it was 5 years that Father Fred had been ordained. And he calls up his friend, Father John, says, John, he said, it's this June, the bishop's coming around, and he said, I've been out of seminary 5 years, and everything I've learned from the people in the parish is so different from that book stuff. He said, in fact, I've forgotten everything. I've just a whole new pastoral response to the needs of the people. So he said, I'm afraid if the bishop asks me a question, I'm going to be sent to someplace in the sticks. So John, who was a pretty good student, he said, Fred, you and I always did well in school. And he said, actually, I'm a pretty good friend of the bishop too. He said, I'll tell you something. Why don't we call the bishop and tell him just to come to one rectory? I've got in my vestibule, there's a little guest parlor there, and there's a space under the door about 1.5 inches. He said, I'll go in first and yell out the answers. You just come in after me, give him the same stuff. He said, because he likes to compare all the different priests to see who the smartest one is, So Fred said, oh, that's a great, thanks, John. I wasn't going to go read through all those books in the next 3 months. So sure enough, the day for the exam comes, June 5th, and the bishop was pretty happy to just go one trip. So he says, Father John, who's going first? He said, I'll go first, Father. He said, come around here. I'm stepping right in. He said, I just have one question for you, Father. He says, yes, I know. He says, I'd like to, let's see, it's a Sunday morning, and you're saying the Mass, and just after the words of consecration, you notice that a fly has circled over the chalice and went right into the sacred species. What would you do, Father? He said, well, Your Excellency, I would consume it, or remove it and hold it over a candlestick, and then pour the remains down the sacrarium in the sacristy. He said, Father, you're one of the brightest men in this whole diocese. Not yet, Your Excellency, but I hope to be someday under your kind guidance and tutelage. And so he said, send in Father Fred, So sure enough, he goes out there and said, Fred, did you hear? He said, I heard everything. He says, step right in. So he says, good morning, Your Excellency. He says, good morning, Father Fred. You live in a parish right nearby. He says, I just have one question to ask you. He said, yes, I know. He said, what if some Saturday afternoon you were hearing confessions, and just at the end of confessions, it was time to go over for dinner. You walk out of the church and you notice that a cow has moseyed into your church. And not only that, but he starts drinking out of the water font. What would you do? He said, well, Your Excellency, I would consume it, or remove it and hold it over a candlestick, and then pour the remains in the sacrarium in the sacristy. He said, Father, you're one of the stupidest men in this whole diocese. He said, not yet, Your Excellency, but I hope to be someday under your kind guidance and tutelage, Well, so there was even fear even after you're ordained, I thought once I was ordained, I dropped all my fears. I started flying better, but some people they're still scared, and how can you preach good news if you're scared yourself? So if you realize how close God is to you and you feel the love of God, you know what love does? When you feel loved, does anybody know what kind of feeling that creates? Let's just think of some time when you just felt you were just absolutely certain you were loved. What does that do for you? You know what that first reaction is inside of you? Anyone think of one right away? I bet you all had something, Are you thinking of something? Oh, I couldn't put it in words? You just felt pretty good? You felt really good. Oh, God. You still feel good. Oh, my goodness. It's going on even now? That's real love when it goes that long. Yeah, I think some people, when they realize that they're loved, when a teenager first finds out that he's got a girlfriend, he starts singing. The guy didn't have a voice. He was embarrassed to even sing until he was 13. All of a sudden, the guy's like singing around the house. The mother knows right away. The mother says, "What's her name?" "Mother, what do you mean?" "Well, I know you've been going to Boy Scouts, but there must be some Girl Scouts there too, And it's like they walk differently. When you realize you're loved, you walk differently. There's a different expression on your face. People notice. They say, "What did you just swallow?" They just know there's something different, What love does for you, when you realize you're loved, it sets you free inside. When Christ showed his love for us, the very first immediate effect was, they call it redemption, they call it freedom. People felt this strange freedom. They said, "Oh my God, it's almost like nothing I can do wrong. And I have no desire to do wrong. I'm just feeling so good," because love makes you feel good and free. When I was thinking of what ABCs I could give you to take home on this last night, the one thing that helped me so much when I studied in India, Tony gave us 3 things to remember. If you want to be a great leader, if you can even look back at what are the characteristics of someone who was a great teacher in your life, what was that wonderful, marvelous characteristic of Jesus that made him such a wonderful leader and teacher, made people want to look for more? There are 3 things you might take home with you. One is, if you can leave people alone and watch them grow, you will have great joy. But so often we think we're responsible and we have to help them, and so often we become interferers in people's lives. There's so much resourcefulness. Now, maybe not in a little child, they need so much help even to roll over sometimes, But as you get older, if you can just watch people grow, the number one thing you do to set people free and to realize they're loved is just stay back and watch them. The second thing is, there's so many laws in life. They're not just church rules and government rules and county laws and family rules, and there are cultural traditions in every family. They pass on these burdensome laws. I don't even want to burden you with all the laws that I've heard from other cultures. They pass on to their families. And then, of course, the little families got their own laws. If you, as a loving parent or teacher or pastor, make exceptions to the law, there's nothing like it. How many times did Jesus do that? Even with the commandments, he said, on that day, the Sabbath, when he fed his own people, when he cured someone, which they said, "Who are you to do this and go against this great law we've got in our scriptures?" And he said, "Well, wouldn't any of you do this too?" It said, "No, we wouldn't. We'd wait till the next day." So Jesus was able to even make exceptions for his own people. And the third thing is, if you look back on the people that have been the most influential and help you grow the most in your lifetime, they would be someone who was compassionate. So the 3 things I learned, which was really surprising for me. One is, leave people alone and watch them grow. Make exceptions to the law, because all the laws, as Jesus said, were made for us. They're only supposed to help. When the laws aren't helping, they're no good at all. They're no good at all. And the third thing is, be compassionate. When in doubt, be compassionate. The other thing I learned an awful lot was, I was brought up that there were 2 ways of doing things. There was my way, and there was the right way. I don't know if you heard that from anybody, older people. They say, "No, Jim, there are 2 ways of doing things." No, there's your way and there's the right way. But of course, the right way was my father's way. But he didn't want to he didn't want to act like he was selfish. So he identified his way with the right way. So then I was really stuck, So then if I did it my way, it was the wrong way. So I kept losing all the time, But I finally figured out his ploy when I was about 35. It took me quite a while. I was a slow learner. But there are 2 types of selfishness. One is when you take care of yourself. That's very, very healthy. God has given you a mind to make choices for yourself. He's given you an appetite so you can say no when it's not good for you and yes when you're hungry. In other words, people who are really sick, they need someone else to feed them. And they said, "Oh, she's not eating now, so we better give her some tube feeding, you know? So healthy people can take care of themselves, their friends, their work, their studies, their food. That's very healthy. So when you do things for yourself, very healthy. It's still selfish, but it's a healthy selfish. The second type of selfishness is very, very destructive, and it's very difficult to separate sometimes. An unhealthy and violent selfishness is when you try to make someone else do your will. That's what I mean in that first step of leaving people alone. How often do we try to get someone else to do what we want? And we say, oh, we think we know what's best for them. We say, oh, come on, let's do it this way. How about if some people, you do it your way and I'll do it mine? Wow, will we ever get together? Yeah, many times we will. There'll be many times we'll cross over and we'll have mutual desires. But so often we thought that, I think there was a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, you know? Actually, that was a misleading title. They were really being good to people and being reserved and quiet. But it sounded like we're supposed to influence people and affect their lives. You know, when you influence people, it means some of you is going into them. There's a far better grace that I think Jesus did. He announced the good news and let them follow when they were ready. So it's a very powerful one. But I still go back to what we've talked about the last 2 days. The thing that I notice that makes us feel most one with creation and with our neighbor and with God is when there's just no fear in our lives. And I think when growing up as a kid, I was afraid of my father, but I wasn't afraid of my mother. That was pretty good. So, unfortunately, my father was a traveling salesman, so I was only afraid on weekends. So I had 5 days when I ran the family. I was the oldest boy, you know, and I was like a comedian in my house, you know, and my sister would tell my mother, Mom, tell him not to tell stories during dinner. I can't eat my dinner. Because I had so many funny things that happened in school every day, you know. So she'd have to leave the table because she was laughing too hard. And my father would come home for the weekend, you know, and he'd say, I'd tell my usual stories about what happened at school. He said, you think that's funny? So I've squelched, you know, like that. So I sort of grew up and I was wondering, my brother had children. I wonder if he was going to be sort of intimidating, you know, because he was like a ranger in the army. And I was wondering whether he was going to be a fearsome dad or just something really accepting and loving and not needing those tactics, you know. So anyway, I used to visit him pretty regularly. And this one day, to give you a style of what I was so proud of, the little kid was about a year and a half. He was able to walk, but and get up on the chair by himself. He wasn't in a high chair anymore, but he had a little cold there when I was visiting, and we were sitting down having breakfast. He was in his pajamas, and I was having a cup of coffee, and he blew his nose in a tissue, and he looked at a little twinkle in his eye, you know. He says, he called me Deebu. It's a special Indian name. You know, little kids have their own language. He called me Deebu. He said, Deebu, would you like this tissue in your coffee? I said, oh, JD, I wouldn't. He said, and the twinkle was starting. He throws it across. It didn't go far enough. It went halfway across the table, you know. So his father was right there, you know. I said, JD, that wasn't very nice. We don't play like that at table. He said, oh, Dad, we're only fooling around. I don't want that kind of fooling around table. I want you to go in the other room there and sit in the stairs until I call you back here. Do you hear? Oh, Dad, Uncle Deeb and I were just playing. I don't like that kind of playing. You go in the other room there. I said, all right. So he goes in the other room. And he gets there. He says, Dad, can I come back? As soon as he got there, he said, can I come back, you know? My brother looks at his watch, you know. Yes, you can come back now, you know. He hadn't been there 2 seconds. You know? So the little kid comes back. He walks right up to my brother. He says, Dad? He said, yes. I didn't sit down. He told him to sit down on the steps. You know? He said, what am I going to do with you? What am I going to do? But you know what's great? What I loved about that, the message got across. And yet there was no fear. He wasn't afraid of this big guy. No fear. Can you imagine if you grew up never being afraid of God the Father, certainly not afraid of Jesus, but can you imagine just not being afraid of God? And certainly we do things wrong and sometimes we do things right, but just no fear. Hopefully we can learn and correct our mistakes and learn from gentle teachers. But some people don't have the patience. They say, well, that takes too long. I can't explain everything, you know. So I was really proud of him, brother, to watch the way he has kept that style the whole time. In our life, if you look at the way children walk and grow, experience life, they have a thing what they call the scientific method you study science. It's called trial and error and growth. They haven't found any other way, whether you're learning a computer, or learning to walk, or learning to do music. There's always trial and error before this growth. That's part of our life. I remember I got a book on juggling. I didn't bring them with me today, but if you've ever studied a book on juggling, the very first step is the wonderful thing. It says, we want to teach you the most important step of juggling. If you get this, you will move very quickly. Has anyone seen that book? The first step is called the drop. You throw it up and you let it fall. They said, now this is going to happen quite often as you're growing. And they get you feeling that, now don't feel bad about it. This is not a mistake. It's part of the way you learn. Because people so often, if you belong to a different system than trial and error and growth, some people brought up like trial, error, and guilt. Oh my God, trying never to make a mistake. Can you imagine if someone is on a different track, if they don't see that growth comes through errors and mistakes, it's the only way you learn. They don't accept the way God created the world. They're trying to put themselves on a different level. I will not make a mistake. And you know what? They don't learn a thing their entire life because they're afraid to make a mistake. Because that horrible feeling called guilt is such a self-punishment. It's so devastating. So these people, they're paralyzed. They say, oh my goodness, I think I'll just pray always. That's the only safe way to do it. I think I'll join a monastery. That will really be safe. Guess what? Can't imagine the guilt in there. Oh my goodness. I went to talk to one lovely sister in a monastery. She said to me, said, I never get a chance to pray here. I said, what? Her whole life she spent there. She can't leave the monastery. She's stuck, I said, what do you mean no chance? Well, we're going to chapel and reading this and they're singing that. Then we have to make altar breads. We're busy all day long trying to support ourselves. No time to pray, no relaxation. I said, oh, glad you told me that. Here I was going to join up. I was looking for peace and quiet, I used to love to, in fact, I still do love to hear First Confessions, they're so refreshing. But a few years ago, this parish asked if I would come in there and give a little introduction before we had the big penance service a month later, if I would talk to the children. It was a sister school, and they didn't have a priest there too often. And so I gathered, there must have been about 60 children there. And I had typed up what the priest says, because they were able to read now in second and third grade, And I typed up what the child's supposed to say, or the penitent. And I said, well, can we do a practice? Would anyone like to read and go to confession? I'll be the priest, I couldn't get a volunteer. And usually kids volunteer for everything. I said, well, it's right here in the card. Just make up some sins. And they wouldn't make them. And I said, would anyone like to be the priest? And all the girls raised their hands. So it's like, I said, okay. So I was only kidding, but they said, okay, I'll go to confession. So I said, we got to practice somehow. We have a little role playing here. So I said, bless me, Father. She was like a second grader girl. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I actually was trying to think of something simple. I put some pepper in the salt shaker back home. And all the kids went, oh, Father. And I said, no, this is just, I'm pretending. This is role playing. This is not exactly, I didn't do this. I said, yes, you did. And I said, hey, listen, she's the priest, and you keep quiet down here, So anyway, she said, well, Father, she read the thing here, you're forgiven. And for your penance, I want you to go home and eat the salt shaker. So now I see why they don't ordain women, Whew, I would never do that again if I ever did it once, So I said, this is it, We were talking at table tonight about this lovely priest who's 93, and he said he was one of the first ones to be able to receive communion at an early age. I guess it was Pius X that permitted frequent and communion. And I thought it was just like, besides just once a month after confession, that you go during the week. But it was actually that people could, younger people could go. Before it was only adults could receive communion. Is that what was true? I don't like that. We were trying to figure whether, do you remember what age it was? Because we were trying to figure whether it was 21 or 12. Oh yeah, so they brought it down to 7 or 8 to give people a chance too. And I was wondering too if they had changed the rules on whether penance moved down at that time too. So if they're going to go to communion, they had to go to confession. I wonder if that actually moved up too. First started, yeah. Maybe some parishes, changed later than others too. But I was sitting around with a few of the priests in my community, and we looked at an old bookshelf and we found one of the Baltimore catechisms. I don't know if you still have them around, maybe but this was like, I think it was back in the 60s or 50s, and there was a beautiful little expression. There was a boy going to confession, and he said he had 3 mortal sins in his soul. The guy was only about 7, it looked like in the book. I said, oh my goodness. And so it said, and Johnny goes to confession, he has 3 mortal sins, and he confesses 2, but he's afraid to tell the 3rd one. How many sins are on his soul? So we went around the community, we tried to know our catechism, you know. So one guy said, well, let's say if he told 2, he only has 1 left. And someone said, oh, he's only 7 years of age, he couldn't even commit a moral sin. I said, that's pretty free, you know. And then, so someone else said, he's got 4 moral sins. I said, 4? How do you get that? He said, well, see, he had 3, he told 2, but it was a bad confession, so now he's got another one. And so we turned over the page, and he was the right guy, so he got a piece of candy. He got the candy, you know, so it was like 4 moral sins. So it was sort of neat the way we were teaching kids, like, everything is sin. It was great, you know, get this whole thing done. But I really liked the guy who said, oh, he's too young to commit sin, moral serious. And I said, well, why? How old does he look? Well, he looks like he's 7. I said, well, what if he was 10 years of age? Could he commit a serious sin then? He said, no, you can't when you're 10 either. I said, well, what about 12? I was trying to push this guy, you know. He says, no, you can't do it when you're 12 either. I said, how about 14? He said, yeah, you can do it when you're 14. I said, oh, good. I was wondering what he was thinking of, you know. So I was like, oh, yeah. No, you said something before about, that I asked them to talk about some topic. What was, did you enjoy the last hour? Was there one other one you asked me about? Oh, God's so small. Yeah. Yeah, I got a special tape I want to play for you tonight. It's, I just heard it last summer. It's, I mean, God is so immense for us, and yet sometimes we've got him like in a teacup. He's so small. I remember when I first moved to Winter Retreat House, I was surprised because we had the chapel right in the house. And so when I came down from my bedroom, I had to go by the chapel before I went down to breakfast in the morning. It was sort of unusual because we were used to, like, you know, bowing or tipping your hat outside the church, you know, but here I had the church right in my house, and I said, this is going to be unusual. So it was a very big retreat house, and the other priest I lived with was away, and I got up one morning, I came down the stairs, I was going down for a cup of coffee, and I was going by the chapel. I didn't stop, you know, and I heard a little voice saying, Jimmy. I said, oh my God. I said, it couldn't be, you know. I checked in the chapel, said, no one's visited me all day today. And we had no retreats that yesterday, you know. I said, So I sat and visited for a while, you know, and I was there for about a minute. I just said a few morning prayers, you know. He said, so I got up to go, and he said, you're not going already, are you? You've only been here 2 minutes. So I said, oh my gosh, I got a whining Jesus, you know. I was like, oh my goodness. So anyway, I tried to pull myself away. I said one more prayer, and he said, you better come back soon. Sound like one of those puppet shows, you know. So I went down at breakfast, and I had my coffee, read the paper, and I was about to go back upstairs again. I said, uh-oh, I can't stand that stuff. So I went out the back door, went around the whole building to the front door of my office, you know. So I worked in the office there, and the only thing was what happened, the next day, I went down the chapel again, and sure enough, I'm going down the stairs. I tried to sneak by the chapel. He said, you're going to sneak by the chapel? So I came back in the chapel, you know, made a little visit, you know. So I said, hello. I started talking like him, sorry. I said, how long I got to stand here, you know, or kneel here? You know, I said, no. Really strange voice, you know. So I said, I'd like to get a cup of coffee in the morning, you know, read the paper. I said, all of a sudden I heard, me too, let's get out of here. So I went down and read the paper, you know. I said, I finally had a grown-up Jesus, you know. I was like, you know, sometimes we have like a nursing home Jesus, you know, just whining all the time. It's like, oh my God, no, listen, Jesus is happy. If anybody's happy in heaven, he's wonderful. But sometimes we get this idea, you say, where do you get this idea from, you know? We just had an anniversary in Rochester, New York. They put a little article in the paper, Sister Joachim and Father Ed, it's their 40th anniversary of their death. The church, they told us, remember the story, was on the front page. The church was burning down, and they ran in to save the tabernacle. They were trying to save the hosts in there, you know, and they died of smoke inhalation. They said, oh no. See, God isn't here, and God is everywhere. But they were trying to save an outward sign. The signs of God's presence are everywhere. So, I mean, they were not neither mocking it nor praising it. They were just sort of saying, some people will do things like that. I mean, can you imagine of all the dear things you have in your home, if your house was on fire, what would you save? What is the most important thing to you? Anybody think of anything? Where would you go? You just have time to get one more thing before the house. Oh, you know what you get, Mary Lou? What? You get some pictures. Oh, like a photo albums? Oh, great. Oh, anybody else think of something right away? Oh, yeah. Take yourself out. Oh, yeah, you're right. Right, say there are no people in the house. Good boy. There are no people in the house, so just some object, yeah. Pictures, anything else? Very good. You want to think of something right away? First thing? Nance? Pictures too? Oh, what would you take out, Scott? Money. Oh, good. You had some cash in your drawer? Just the bills. You probably wouldn't have to worry about the change, yeah. Because that wouldn't burn too much. Yeah. Very good. Good. Anyone else think of something to take out right away? Okay, yeah. Something worth, like, were you thinking of something in your house? You know where it is? You pardon me? Card collection. Oh, great, yeah. You know what I thought of when I did that meditation? I said I would take my my hard disk drive, because I spent like 2 or 3 years working on some books, and I just go in and, everything else, the clothes can replace, but I thought that was sort of my work for the last few years, But even then, if I didn't get it, and someone said, why don't you take your floppies, your backup? I said, okay, I'll take my floppies, Can't have everything, Yeah, but it's sort of interesting, and I gave this meditation one time to a group, and they said to me, she said, our house burned down last year. And I said, and what'd you do? She said, my husband and the next door neighbor went in looking for things. They didn't know what to get. And I was so angry that he went into this house because it was a little smoky and everything. And she said, I was furious that he would even go back in, And she said, they came out a few minutes later and I said, what'd you get? They said, nothing. We didn't know what to take. It was like, it was so interesting, And here are these like dear possessions. We think we're really attached to things. We think we really have to hold on to things. But we're really not attached. When the chips are down and say, all I need for my life to be happy is right here. I don't need those toys. I don't need those savings. I really don't even know those pictures, because the pictures are right in here. And when I get the message, you know what? I become a lighter person. I find myself walking with a light touch through life. And all the things I thought I needed, and all the things I thought I desired, I've already got them already. When Jesus announced to us that we were redeemed, it wasn't something you had to earn or work on or see someday in the future. He says, no, the kingdom's already yours. If you can open your eyes now, you're going to get little bits of it. Now, you can't absorb it all in one day. In order to go to Florida, you have to go down there. All you can do in one day is just get a little chunk of Columbiana. And if you'll notice that the thing that gets in the way of your happiness is the thing that you desire. There was a famous expression in the East saying, the cause of upset in a person's life is when they desire something more than they have right now. And so it's a great clue for me. Every time I find myself a little bit anxious or worried about something, I can figure out immediately what it is. It says, you want something more than you've got, huh? Yeah. Oh, good. Don't you think you've got enough of what God has given you? Oh, yeah. So I'm looking at the thing I don't have and I'm desiring it. I remember I talked to a lady a few weeks ago, and she said, we had a big family reunion over Christmas, and my brother from Midwest couldn't make it, and my mother was so upset. She had like 8 children. My mother was so upset that she wouldn't talk to anybody at the party. The other 7 brothers and sisters were there. They had come from all over, and the kids and so on. She said, no, if they couldn't all be here, I am not going to be happy. Can you imagine that? You make a decision, I will not be happy, It's like, I want all the things I want, then I'll be happy. And that's why happiness is like something we interfere with. So that was such an obvious example of what makes the person unhappy, their desires. And if you've got the kingdom, and you've got the Lord's forgiveness, and you've got all the grace you need, I have to try to be unhappy. Isn't that a great feeling? You have to think, I'm going to try to be unhappy. It's really hard. It's hard to make children unhappy. Little children, they just have this, they bounce back so fast because they don't live on trial, error, and guilt. They live on trial, error, growth. When I was with my little nephew, who's about a 1.5 years, when his mother was taking a shower, actually he's a grandnephew, I don't want to say that. We took a walk down the street, and he's walking fairly well, but he falls down a lot at home, but you noticed it more when he was in the street. And every time he fell in the street, he bruised his little knee. And he was falling down and he'd go, ow! And he'd get up and keep walking, And I go like this, I want to pick up. No, he wanted to explore the world. And so it takes about 10 more steps and he fell down again, right in the same knee. I said, oh, jeez. So he was crying a little bit. So I picked him up and I got blood all over my shirt. So it's like, that wasn't too good. And he wanted to get down anyway. It hurt, but he wanted to keep exploring the world. He wanted to keep walking, So sure enough, he fell one more time in the knee, and I went like that. He goes like this, and he keeps walking. You know what he did the next time, though? The 4th time he fell? He kept his knee up. He fell on two hands and one. He said, not on that knee, baby. I said, wow, this guy's smart, you know? I mean, I could protect him from walking and protect him from falling, you know. But if you let him live, my God, there's so much ingenuity and grace in people. Trial and error and growth. We got to let each other grow, give each other space. You know, I don't think there would be a single war in the world if people weren't trying to change or convert or interfere or send more arms or make money off somebody else. Two people, when they fight and no one else is there, they stop fighting after a while. But if they've got overwhelming odds here, they said, oh, good. If they've got so many extra people from different countries on their side, they keep going on and on. A few years ago, before the USSR had broken up, there were 42 wars going on in the world, little countries all over the place. And the United States was involved in 38 of them, supplying arms, 38. And Russia at the time was involved with 36. And we weren't at war, but keeping them all going, keeping them all different countries. So when I talk about interference with other people and leave people alone, it works on the church level. Stop converting people. Leave them alone. God loves them right where they are. Nationalize. Let them have their own nationality. There's such a flavor there. But I don't think we can change much. If we can just change ourselves and have our own freedom, it will spread gradually like Jesus did, you know. Can't change the whole world. I was reflecting on, we don't have much example in the leadership the last 12 years, though. When you get a person who was against some guy like named Noriega in Panama to go bomb Panama City and 3,000 homes are lost, looking for one person. That's not the way to deal with evil, especially someone you've dealt with for 10 years. That's not the way you deal with your friends or enemies. It's like, what a poor example. If you've got the power, do it. So we're living in a world that's not very Christ-like, you know. So to be alone like this, to keep your sanity and keep your love and keep your freedom, I think it's a real tough thing to do. I remember reading quite a few years ago that the early Christians, not only did they not fight the lions, but they followed the mandates of Jesus on love to the nth degree. When they said love their enemies, they didn't take up arms. There were many countries all the way through history that had soldiers, but no Christians joined the army. They said, no, we don't desire to kill anybody. They were the true pacifists up until, I'm guessing now which century it was, when some emperor who was very good to the church said, well, couldn't we just have a few soldiers or Christians like a token? And then it was broken down. So once we got a few soldiers, then the whole philosophy changed, you know. And so now, we sometimes even think it's heroic to be shot at or to shoot other people. So how can we be reconciled with a world that is greedy for more? They don't think they're there yet. They don't realize that the kingdom of God is theirs already. The message of Jesus that the kingdom of God is here allays all those greedy, ambitious, competitive desires. In visiting different schools, I noticed if you want to watch people get angry, you want to watch them get competitive, give a test for all of them and give a grade to each one and see who the best all the way down the 1st to 24th is. And you'll get them sort of crawling to be on top. I mean, and yet we have to have tests, but it's so interesting, where does competitiveness come from? Where does the desire to beat your enemy come from? To even beat your friend and be better than someone else come from? So society works like that, and business works like that, and school works like that. But we have to preserve one place, the kingdom of God, where even the last shall be first, and the middle shall be first, and the first shall be first. They're all first in the kingdom of God. So it requires almost, the word that they used in the New Testament was a metanoia, a change of heart, a change of seeing a picture like Jesus did. I thought we'd end this evening's presentation with a meditation. So if you'd like to breathe for a few moments. I found this lovely book that's got a great meditation in it. It's wonderful to know that at this very moment, you are sitting in the palms of God's hands. And you could jump as high as you would like. And you would never be harmed. And you could never escape the love of God. whether you turned your back or tried to ignore it. You might picture God as a gentle parent, sitting next to you and completely content with you. God has no further desires or expectations than to be near you. Can you picture God speaking to you? I have come that you may have life. When you were young, you were the apple of my eye. When you were growing up, clumsily searching and getting lost, I delighted in your every move. When someone taught you about judgment and you learned about good and evil, I recall that you felt guilty and inadequate. I wanted to pick you up and squeeze my love into you. When you fell in love, you were so excited. You danced for joy. I danced with you. When you had some hard knocks and felt rejected, I wanted to support you with a visible presence, but I knew you would make it. I knew what I had created, and I had no doubts about you. I felt disappointed when you were taught that you could offend me, or hurt me, or lose my love. I was so sad when someone convinced you that I might punish or embarrass you. I guess I just want to tell you again that you and I are one in mind and heart and spirit. I want you to know that nothing you could ever say or do could ever separate us. No sin, no judgment, no failure, nothing inside you or outside you, no evil, nothing in the future or the past. If you could possibly reject me, I would still love you just as much as I love Mary. With all your limitations and selfishness, self-righteousness and jealousies, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I loved you when you were angry, sad, pompous, or depressed. I would rather spend 1,000 years with you than one day with all the queens of history. I would rather spend one day at your side than 1,000 years with saints and popes and kings. I would give my life for you. I would give my son for you. I already have. Do you know that my love has no bounds? I love you the same whether you turn your back to me or to my people. I am so silly to be in love with you. Yes, I am always on your side, and I am always at your side. I am trying to think of an example to assure you, to erase the last bit of doubt or fear in you. I even prefer your denial of me, your betrayal of me, your rejection of me, to receiving the whole world's praise. How is that? Now can you believe that my love has no bounds and no restrictions? I would like to wipe away every tear and every fear you could possibly have. I am with you, and I am yours always. I want you now to have all possible joy, a fullness of life, and a deep peace that the world cannot give or take away. I have the same affection for you as I have for my son Jesus. My covenant with you was made before you were born.